Nick's newest Nicktoon. It's a never-before-seen sneak peek of Spongebob Squarepants, right after the Kids' Choice Awards, tonight on the best place to turn for new tunes, Nickelodeon.
Prepare to be vanquished.
On May 1st, 1999, Nickelodeon introduced the world to a square yellow sponge who lived in a pineapple under the sea, named Spongebob Squarepants. Created by former marine biologist Steven Hillenburg, the show followed the titular sponge and his friends in the undersea city of Bikini Bottom, going about their lives and getting into crazy deep-sea adventures. The show became an absolute success, with fans from all around the world falling in love with the yellow guy. The series quickly became the flagship series for Nickelodeon almost overnight, and SpongeBob became one of the most well-known characters in the world, on the same level as Mickey Mouse or Mario. It has since become the 5th longest running American animated series, and the most distributed Viacom property of all time. The series has spanned comics, film, video games, theme park rides, hotels, resorts, parades, you name it. SpongeBob has left an impact in the world, and continues to do so. But after all these years, you have to wonder, is Nickelodeon squeezing him a bit too dry? So today, we're going to be taking a look at the legacy of SpongeBob, his creator Steven Hillenburg, and how Nickelodeon became over-reliant on the property. Go anywhere on the internet and you'll hear a SpongeBob meme or reference. The Super Bowl halftime show of 2019 was a SpongeBob reference. Sort of. SpongeBob has been ingrained into our very culture, and references to the show are now as natural as any other joke. So what exactly is it about this show that caused such a cultural impact? Let's start at the beginning. While teaching marine biology at the Ocean Institute of California in the 1980s, Steven Hillenburg got the idea to combine two of his passions, comics and marine life. Many of the ideas that would become the basis for SpongeBob started in his comic, The Intertidal Zone. Hillenburg would later go on to work on Rocko's Modern Life, where he met Tom Kenny, the voice of Heifer. One of the writers for Rocko, Martin Olson, read through The Intertidal Zone and encouraged Hillenburg to pitch his own series. At this point, he began to look closer at his old comic and expand on the characters, namely the announcer, Bob the Sponge, who would of course evolve into SpongeBob. SpongeBob was initially known as Sponge Boy and wore a green hat. Unfortunately, that name was already taken and copyrighted by a mop, so they switched the name around to SpongeBob. Nickelodeon had an open slot in their animation schedule that year, as the original show that would have filled it, Sniz and Fondue, was cancelled due to its creator leaving the studio. The slot was given to Hillenburg, and production on the soon-to-be legendary series began.
That's right! One hydrodynamic spatula with port and starboard attachments, and let's not forget the turbo drive! Would you believe they only had one in stock? To the kitchen!
Within the first month of its airing, SpongeBob overtook Pokemon as the highest-rated children's show on television. It was an immediate hit, topping the charts and winning awards left and right. For the next 3 seasons, the series would chum out classic after classic, such as Pizza Delivery, Band Geeks, Chocolate with Nuts. Almost every episode was quotable. With 3 immensely successful seasons under its belt, Hillenburg decided to end the series in a grand way. The Spongebob Squarepants movie. Paramount had offered numerous film deals to Hillenburg, but he always turned them down. However, with his vision of a series finale in mind, he finally accepted one in 2002, and began developing the film. With a boost in animation quality, a hilarious and heartwarming story, along with many quotable moments, the Spongebob Squarepants movie was an undeniable hit. With SpongeBob finally becoming manager of the Krusty Krab 2, the series had found a perfect place to end. Except Nickelodeon had other plans. Hillenburg wanted to end the series so that it wouldn't have to jump the shark, but the ratings were just too high for Nickelodeon to let the show go, so more episodes were ordered. And Hillenburg departed from his own series, leaving Paul Tibbitt in charge as showrunner, one of his favorite and most trusted crew members from the first 3 seasons. Despite his trust in Tibbitt, fans see this moment as a turning point in the series, the point where it would change forever, and not for the best. While the movie came out in 2004, the series itself underwent production hiatus in 2002, while the film was being made. After it had released and all of Season 3 had broadcasted, Hillenburg departed from his own show after Nickelodeon made the choice to continue the series into a Season 4. Airing in 2005, the episodes Fear of a Krabby Patty and Shell of a Man aired, beginning the post-Hillenburg era of SpongeBob. Despite his stepping down as showrunner, Hillenburg remained with the series in a much smaller role, where he offered his advice and suggestions to the crew. Despite their best efforts, the audience began to notice that the series had changed in a way they couldn't quite put their finger on. Various publications, such as MSN, the AV Club, and Vulture, reported on the declining quality of the series. For seasons 4 through 8, the show seemed to be running on autopilot, moving away from clever humor to more grossed out jokes and random physical humor. While the intended audience, children, still regularly tuned in, teens and older fans found the new direction of the series off-putting compared to the previous seasons where it appealed to all ages. With this new direction the series was heading in, the characters changed to fit it. SpongeBob himself went from being a whimsical, naive sponge to an annoying and idiotic man-child. His obsession with Squidward was also amplified, leading it to feel like basic stalking. Sandy became more associated with science and became more of a stereotypical super genius. Patrick, however, was the most notorious example, who went from being SpongeBob's well-meaning low IQ best friend to a complete dick. Many fans were unhappy with these changes made to the main characters, as they felt as though they were completely different people now. Despite the negative reactions from fans, ratings and merchandise sales continued to skyrocket, as SpongeBob had become a global brand at that point. Around 2005, when Season 4 began airing, Nickelodeon became over-reliant on SpongeBob. A SpongeBob syndrome, as Robotaxi calls it, began to take hold on the network, where any series that premiered that wasn't immediately as successful as SpongeBob was ultimately kicked to the curb and cancelled. Notable examples of this are Harvey Beaks, Robot and Monster, Welcome to the Wayne, and El Tigre. It's a ridiculously unfair standard to hold a new series to, as rarely do they find their footing and success in their first season like SpongeBob did. Unfortunately, many shows just aren't given that chance on Nickelodeon. Whenever their ratings come in, Nickelodeon usually quietly pushes the series to their sister channel, Nicktoons Network, where the remaining episodes air, and the show ends to no fanfare. Recently, The Loud House is the only Nicktoon to be given a fair chance, now entering its 4th year on the air. Alongside Loud House and SpongeBob, Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are the only currently airing Nicktoons on the network at the time of writing this video. On June 10th, 2014, it was announced that production had begun on a sequel to the Spongebob Squarepants movie. It was also announced that Steven Hillenburg would be acting as the executive producer of the film. It was reported in 2002 that he helped with writing the script, but nobody expected him to return to the series after he had been away for so long. The sequel, titled The SpongeBob Movie Sponge Out of Water, would release to critical acclaim, with much of its success attributed to the return of Hillenburg. Following the second film, Hillenburg returned to the series as a full-time executive producer, rather than the small advisor role he took on after the release of the first movie. Season 10 was a season full of mix-ups for the series. Not only was Hillenburg back after being gone for so long, but this was the first season to not involve longtime crew member and showrunner Paul Tibbett, whom had left the series to focus on developing the third SpongeBob film, which we'll go over later. Sadly, during the production of this season, Steven Hillenburg was diagnosed with ALS, a terminal illness that causes the death of neurons that control the brain and spinal cord. In a statement he released to the public, he stated that he would continue to work on SpongeBob for, quote-unquote, as long as he is able. He added, quote, "My family is grateful for the outpouring of love and support. We ask that our sincere request for privacy be honored during this time," unquote. Steven Hillenburg passed away on November 26, 2018, at his home in Southern California. He was 57. The following day, he was cremated and his ashes were scattered in the Pacific Ocean, 500 yards off the coast of California. His contributions to the animation industry and children's media will forever be remembered, and his legacy continues to this day. On February 14th, 2019, it was announced that Nickelodeon would be celebrating the 20th anniversary of SpongeBob SquarePants with the best year ever, as they call it. Around the same time, Nickelodeon announced their upcoming slate for their 2019-2020 schedule. The majority of the shows featured were revivals and spin-offs, with barely any original content. However, the main headliner was the familiar yellow sponge. Not only was Spongebob Squarepants continuing into the year, but Nickelodeon announced a host of spin-offs, which CBR.com described as, quote, including new shows, specials, and films based around other characters in the franchise, unquote. The amount of spin-offs and films are undetermined, but the fact that it's plural indicates that Nickelodeon plans on keeping this boat of a franchise chugging along. The first installment of this new direction was announced to be the third theatrical film that Paul Tibbitt had been working on, 2020's The SpongeBob Movie, It's a Wonderful Sponge. Unlike the previous two films though, this is planned to be a prequel film, following a 10-year-old SpongeBob during his summer at Camp Coral. During his time there, his pet snail Gary is kidnapped by Poseidon and taken to the lost city of Atlantic City, so he and his new best friend Patrick must go out and rescue him. However, this film won't be the end of SpongeBob's adventures at Camp Coral, as the film is acting as a tie-in to launch the first spin-off of the SpongeBob series, simply titled Camp Coral. Oddly enough, it's a spin-off with the entire same main cast as the original series, which is weird considering that Mr. Krabs, Sandy, and Mrs. Puff will be there, whom we've all seen meet SpongeBob for the first time in the original series. The spin-off has been met with some polarizing views regarding the timing of its announcement and its content. The announcement came only 3 months following the death of Stephen Hillenburg, which many viewed to be in poor taste. Additionally, Stephen Hillenburg has gone on record stating that he was against the ideas of spin-offs for the series. In a 2009 interview with TBI Vision, a question about the possibility of spin-offs came up, to which he replied, quote, "The show is about SpongeBob, he's the core element, and it's about how he relates to the other characters. Patrick by himself might be a bit too much, so I don't see any spin-offs." Granted, Camp Coral is still focused on SpongeBob as the main character, but the fact that it's a spin-off still stands. In the same interview, he states that he had to fight against Nickelodeon at the very start of the series to keep SpongeBob as a young adult instead of a child, which is what Nickelodeon wanted originally. Compromises were made, such as SpongeBob's parents showing up every now and then, as well as him going to boating school. It's difficult to know exactly what Hillenburg's full views on spin-offs and younger versions of his characters were without putting words in his mouth, but upon the announcement of Camp Coral, someone very close to him who would know his views spoke out. Paul Tibbitt. On the day of the announcement, Paul tweeted, "I do not mean any disrespect to my colleagues who are working on this show. They are good people and talented artists. But this is some greedy, lazy executiving right here. And they all know full well Steve would have hated this. Shame on them." From Paul's tweet, a man who was very close to Hillenburg and knew SpongeBob inside and out, it's clear that the concept of Camp Coral is something that would not go over well with Steve. It's worth noting that shows usually don't go from concept to greenlight in just 3 months. It's likely that Nickelodeon already had this planned and would have announced this even if Hillenburg was still alive. Yes, it absolutely goes against the wishes of Hillenburg, the creator, but SpongeBob is owned by Nickelodeon. That's kind of what happens when a network wants to air your show. The entertainment business isn't always nice. However, announcing a slew of projects shortly after the creator died is still pretty scummy. And without Hillenburg around, I'm skeptical as to how these new spin-offs will perform. While SpongeBob has turned into a massive beast of a franchise, one that has strayed far away from its original purpose, let's not forget the amazing legacy that Stephen Hillenburg left behind with his phenomenal series. I mean, the fact that we're still talking about it almost 20 years later is an impressive feat. Granted, that's because it still hasn't left the air yet, but even if it had, I'm pretty sure we'd all still fondly remember what it was, and how it touched our childhood, our teen years, and even college years for me. Steve made sure that SpongeBob was a show for everyone, no matter what age you were. Let's remember it for what it was, not for what it's become.